Two staff members in matching black vests walk a man in a worn corduroy jacket through a glittering theater lobby, past the champagne and the chandeliers and the people in gowns, steering him gently but firmly toward a service door at the side of the room. They are being polite about it. They are also being clear. This man does not belong here, and he is being removed before he can embarrass anyone, and he is being taken out the back so the important people never have to see it happen. The man does not argue. He does not raise his voice. He lets himself be walked out the side door into a cold brick alley behind the building, and he thanks the young man who escorted him, and the door clicks shut, and that is that. Except for one thing, one small thing that not a single person in that lobby knew. 5 days earlier, the previous Thursday, that same man in the worn corduroy jacket had sat across a desk from the owner of that theater and handed him a check for $3.2 million, the check that paid off the debt, the check that stopped the wrecking ball, the check that was the only reason there was a lobby to stand in, a gala to attend, or a building to belong to at all. The man they had just escorted out the back door like a problem to be hidden was the reason every other person in that room had somewhere to stand. How does that happen? How does a woman come to throw the savior of her theater out the service entrance without ever knowing his face? Stay with me. Because the answer is about a frightened girl in a balcony 40 years ago. And it is the saddest and most human reason in any of these stories. There is a theater in St. Louis called the Avalon. It went up in 1921. A jewel box of a playhouse with a gold leaf ceiling and 600 red velvet seats, and a marquee that had spelled out 1,000 names in flickering bulbs. For most of a century, it was the beating heart of its neighborhood. Then, the neighborhood changed, and the money left. And by last winter, the Avalon was 3 weeks from a demolition permit, dark and cold and slated to become a parking structure, the way these things always seem to end. And then, quietly, it didn't. A check appeared. The debt vanished. The permit was withdrawn. And the Avalon, saved by a benefactor whose name appeared on no plaque and no press release, at his own insistence, was reborn. The reopening gala was the grandest night the building had seen in 50 years, $600 a plate. The mayor came. The lobby glittered with people who had not set foot in that part of the city in decades, in gowns and tuxedos, holding champagne under the restored gold ceiling, and at the center of it all moved the woman whose job it was to make this exact evening happen. The Avalon's new executive director, Claire Whitlock. Into that lobby, around 8 o'clock, came a man in a corduroy jacket gone soft at the elbows, gray in his hair, a face most people in tuxedos would have looked straight through. He had not come for the champagne. He had slipped in through the front doors during the crush, and he was standing very still off to one side, looking up, just looking up, at the gold leaf ceiling, at the restored marquee glow coming through the lobby doors, at a building he had not stood inside in 31 years. His name was Cole Hartley, and the check from last Thursday had been his. He had not come to be thanked. He had come for one reason only, the reason a person goes back to a place like this. He had needed to see it alive again. He had needed to stand under that ceiling one more time and feel what he'd felt the first time, when he was 23 and broke, and the Avalon had been the place that decided the entire rest of his life. He was not planning to say a word to anyone. He was just going to look and feel it and go. He never got the chance because Claire Whitlock saw him first. Claire Whitlock was 47 years old, and to understand why she could look at a quiet man under the gold ceiling and feel only threat, you have to understand a girl in a balcony 40 years before. She had grown up 6 blocks from the Avalon, in the neighborhood as it was on its way down, the daughter of a woman who took in laundry and a father who was mostly gone. And the Avalon, even then, even fading, had been the most beautiful thing in Claire Whitlock's small, cold world. She used to sneak in, up the fire stairs on the side into the top balcony, where she would crouch in the dark and watch whatever was on the stage and feel, for 2 hours, like she was somewhere that mattered, like she was someone who got to be in a room like this. She was 11 the night an usher caught her. He took her by the arm, in front of a balcony full of people in nice clothes who turned to look, and he walked her down the stairs and out a side door into the alley, and he told her, not unkindly, but very clearly, that this was not a place for kids who couldn't pay, and that she shouldn't come back. And Claire Whitlock stood in that alley, in the cold, 11 years old, burning with a shame so total it organized the rest of her life, and she made herself a promise. Someday, I'm going to be on the inside of a place like this, and no one is ever going to walk me out a side door again. She kept the promise. She clawed her way through a scholarship and a theater degree and 20 years of brutal, underpaid work in companies that lived hand to mouth. And she learned, the hard way, the lesson that hardened her, that beauty isn't enough, that love isn't enough, that the most magnificent theater in the world will be turned into a parking structure if it can't make the people with money feel comfortable enough to write checks. She had watched a company she loved, a scrappy, brilliant, broke little company that had been her whole heart in her 30s, die in a single season because it could not make itself respectable enough for the donors. She had stood in the wreckage of it and swore a second promise on top of the first. Never again. Never again will something I love die because it looked too small, too poor, too unpolished for the people who could save it. So when the Avalon came calling, Claire Whitlock arrived like a woman possessed. She would make this place glow. She would make it so beautiful, so polished, so flawlessly impressive that the money would never leave again. And tonight, with the mayor in the room and a foundation patron named Mrs. Ashford circling a naming gift that could endow the theater for a generation, every single detail had to be perfect. Nothing out of place. Nothing that whispered small time. Nothing that reminded the people with money that this was, underneath the gold leaf, still a building in a neighborhood they'd been taught to fear. And then she turned, with Mrs. Ashford on her arm, and saw a shabby man in a corduroy jacket standing under the chandelier, and her whole body went cold with a very specific fear. She did not see Cole Hartley. She did not see the man who'd written the check. She saw the thing that could ruin the most important night of her career. She saw, though she would not have said it, could not have said it, the 11-year-old in the balcony. The one who didn't belong. The one who had to go before anyone important noticed. She caught the eye of a young usher across the lobby. A small nod toward the man. Handle it. Quietly, out the back. The young usher's name was Danny Vesquez. He was 22, working the gala for the overtime, paying his way through community college one shift at a time, and he was the kind of kid who still believed, in a way the job had not yet beaten out of him, that you treated everybody the same. He didn't want to do it. You could see he didn't want to do it, but the director had given the look, and Danny was 22 and needed the shift, so he crossed the lobby with another vested staffer, and he approached the man in the corduroy jacket as gently as he knew how. "Sir? I'm sorry, this is a private event tonight. I'm going to have to ask you to step out. We can go this way, it's quicker." The man looked at Danny. not angry, something almost like understanding. This way was a hand gesturing toward the side door, the service door. The one that didn't lead to the front steps where the photographers were. The one that led to the alley where nobody important would see a shabby man being removed. Out the back, the man said. Not a question. He understood the geography of it perfectly. It's just easier, sir. The man nodded slowly. And he went. He let two young men in vests walk him across the beautiful lobby he had paid $3.2 million to save, past the champagne to the service door, and he did not say a single word about who he was or what he'd done. Because to Cole Hartley, that would have been the one truly unforgivable thing, to make these people feel small in the building he'd saved precisely so that people would stop being made to feel small in it. At the door, he stopped, and he looked at Danny, and he said one thing. Quietly, just to him. It's all right. You're doing your job. A pause. Can I ask you something, though? Honestly, if I were just a guy who loved this place, who maybe got his whole life out of this place a long time ago, but who showed up tonight without the right jacket? Would there be any room in here for me at all? Any? Danny Visquez opened his mouth. Nothing came out. The man smiled, not unkindly, and stepped out into the cold brick alley. The door clicked shut, and Danny Visquez stood there, with the man's question sitting in his chest like a stone. Because he did not have an answer, and he was old enough to know that not having one meant something. It was an old man who broke it open. Gus Halloran was 74 years old and had been the stage manager of the Avalon for 51 years, through 3 owners and a fire, and the long dark slide toward the wrecking ball, and now, somehow, back into the light. He knew every brick of that building, and every ghost in it, and he had been standing at the edge of the lobby when the man in corduroy came in, and something in the way the man looked up at the ceiling had stopped Gus Halloran's heart for a second, because he had seen that exact look on that exact face once before, a long, long time ago. He pushed through the crowd to where Claire stood with Mrs. Ashford. Claire, that man. The one Danny just walked out. Where'd he go? Gus, not now. Where did he go? It was not a question now. I had him removed. He was. Gus, we have Mrs. Ashford here. I cannot have some. Removed. Gus Halloran's face had gone gray. Claire, 31 years ago, a broke kid slept in our prop loft for a summer because he had nowhere else, and old Abe Brenner gave him his first real part on that stage, and that kid went on to. Claire, that's Cole Hartley. That's Cole Hartley, and you just had 2 boys walk him out the service door. The champagne stopped halfway to several mouths. And here is where a different woman might have softened. But Claire Whitlock had spent 40 years building a wall against exactly this feeling, and her first instinct, the instinct of the frightened, was to hold the wall. That's, Gus, that's not possible. The man was clearly. She turned to Mrs. Ashford with a brittle smile. I'm so sorry, there's a small mix-up. Let me just... That was when Sol Brenner reached her. Old Abe's son, 81 years old, the owner of the Avalon, the man who 5 days earlier had sat across his desk and watched a man in a corduroy jacket hand him a check for $3.2 million and ask, as the only condition, that no one ever know his name. Sol Brenner did not raise his voice. He didn't need to. The lobby had gone quiet enough to hear him. Claire, he said, the man you just had taken out the back door is the man who bought this building. Last Thursday. With his own money, so that all of these people would have somewhere to stand tonight. He looked at her, and there was no cruelty in it, only a terrible sadness. He asked me to keep his name off everything. He didn't want a plaque. He didn't want a seat with a brass tag on it. He just wanted to come back one night and stand under the ceiling. And we put him in the alley. Sol's voice finally cracked. Do you understand what this place was even for, Claire? Do you understand it at all? Claire Whitlock stood in the middle of her perfect, glittering, gold-lit lobby, and she had no answer. The floor seemed to tilt, and then she turned and ran. Actually ran, in her gown, through the crowd, toward the service door and the cold alley behind it. He was still there, sitting on an overturned milk crate by the stage door, in no hurry, looking up at the back of the marquee where the bulbs glowed against the dark, the way a man sits when he has nowhere he'd rather be and nothing left to prove. He looked up when the door banged open and Claire Whitlock came out into the cold, and he did not look angry or vindicated or anything but kind. You'll freeze out here, he said. Come back in, it's your night. Mr. Hartley, she could barely get it out. I had you. I threw you out of your own, it's not mine, he said gently. That was sort of the whole point of the check. It was never supposed to be mine. He patted the crate beside him. Sit down a second. Before you say a bunch of things you'll be embarrassed about later. I didn't come here to ruin your night. I came to look at a ceiling. She sat down, in her gown, on a crate in an alley, next to the man she'd had removed. You snuck in here as a kid, didn't you? Cole said, quiet, not a guess. And somebody walked you out a side door once, a long time ago, because you didn't have the right clothes, or a ticket, or whatever they decided you were missing. He watched her face confirm it. And you've spent your whole life since then making sure you'd be on the inside, making sure nobody could ever walk you out again. And tonight you looked at a shabby guy under the chandelier, and you didn't see a person. You saw the kid you used to be, and you got her out the door before anybody important noticed her. He shook his head slowly. You weren't protecting the donors, Claire. You were protecting that 11-year-old. You've been protecting her for 40 years by becoming the usher who threw her out. Claire Whitlock put her face in her hands and wept. In an alley, in a $600 gown. I slept in the prop loft up there, Cole said, nodding at the building. One summer, I was 23 and I had nothing, and Abe Brenner caught me sneaking in to sleep, and instead of calling the cops, he gave me a key and a part and told me something I've never forgotten. He paused. He said, "This building doesn't care what you came in wearing. Nobody who ever mattered in here did. That's why I bought it, Claire. Not for the gold ceiling, for the part where it doesn't care what you came in wearing." He turned to her. "That boy who walked me out tonight. Danny, and the kids 6 blocks over, who can see this marquee from their windows and have never once been inside. And the 11-year-old you used to be." His voice was very gentle. "Who are you keeping out tonight, that this whole place was built to let in?" Claire Whitlock cried in the cold for a while. And then she wiped her face and stood up and looked at the stage door like she was seeing it for the first time. "Will you come back in?" she said. "Not to be. I won't make a thing of you. I know you don't want that. I have something I need to fix, in front of everyone, and I'd like you to be in the room when I do it." "I'll stand in the back," Cole said, standing, brushing off his corduroy, "where I can see the ceiling." When Claire Whitlock walked back into that lobby, her makeup was ruined, and her gown had milk crate dust on the back of it, and she had never looked less polished in her life, and she walked straight to the small stage at the end of the lobby and picked up the microphone, and the glittering room went quiet. She did not introduce Cole. She did not point him out. He was in the back, by the doors, looking up. "40 minutes ago," Claire said, and her voice shook and she let it, "I had a man removed from this lobby. Out the back door. Because he didn't look like the rest of us. I want to tell you the truth about that, because I've spent my whole career making rooms like this look perfect. And tonight I think the most important thing I can do is let one be honest instead. She found Danny Vasquez in the crowd, the young usher, standing frozen by the coat check. Danny, come here a second. I gave you an order tonight that you didn't want to follow, and you were right not to want to, and I made you do it anyway. In front of everyone. I'm sorry. You were the only one in this lobby acting like you remembered what this building is for. Danny Vasquez came forward with his eyes streaming and not one idea what to do with his hands, and the room, the mayor, Mrs. Ashford, the gowns and tuxedos, started, slowly, to clap. It built. It rolled across that gold-lit lobby and up to the ceiling that didn't care what anyone had come in wearing. And Danny was crying, and the old stage manager Gus Halloran was crying, and Sol Brenner had his hand over his mouth. And in the back, by the doors, a man in a corduroy jacket smiled. The real one. The crooked, unhurried one. Then Claire said the rest of it, about who the Avalon was for. About the 6 blocks of neighborhood that could see the marquee and had never been inside, about the kids in the balcony, about every person who'd ever been walked out a side door for the crime of loving something they couldn't afford. And by the time she finished, the night had become a different kind of night, entirely. Cole Hartley watched until the applause settled, and then, while every eye in the room was on the small bright stage, he slipped out the front doors, down the steps the photographers had given up on, and was gone into the city as exactly the nobody he'd come in as. He never did give anyone the chance to thank him. Here's the part that matters. The applause in the lobby was the easy part. The applause is always the easy part. The Avalon did not transform overnight, because 40 years of believing that beauty had to be exclusive to survive is not a thing Claire Whitlock put down in one alley. But she started. Mrs. Ashford, it turned out. The patron Claire had been so terrified of offending, had watched the whole thing from the lobby, and the next morning she called and made her naming gift after all, and asked that it fund not the lobby chandeliers, but 1,000 free seats a year for the neighborhood, because, she said, that was the first honest thing I've seen at one of these galas in 30 years, and I'd like to pay for more of it. Claire built the program herself. Pay what you can nights. Free matinees for the schools 6 blocks over. A side door. The same side door she'd been walked out of at 11. The same one she'd had Cole walked out of at 47, that she had repainted bright red and rehung with a new brass sign that said, in plain letters, "This door is for everyone. Come in." She kept the gold ceiling. She just stopped pretending it was the point. Danny Vasquez did not stay an usher. Claire pulled him into the staff, then into stage management under old Gus Halloran, who took the kid under his wing for the last good years of his career and taught him every secret of a building Gus had loved for 51 years. When Gus finally retired, it was Danny, 28 by then, who became the youngest stage manager in the Avalon's history. He keeps the man's question taped inside his locker, in his own handwriting, the thing he couldn't answer in the lobby that night. If somebody loves this place and shows up without the right jacket, is there room for them here? And under it, his answer, added later, there is now. Claire Whitlock changed the most. The way the people who are most afraid often do once they stop being afraid. She became the fiercest enemy of every velvet rope in that building. She told the alley story at every gala for the rest of her career, on purpose, to remind the people with money what they were actually buying. And she never once said the name of the man in the corduroy jacket, because he'd asked her not to, and keeping that promise became, for Claire, a kind of daily prayer. The one piece of grace she could give back to a man who'd given her everything, and asked for nothing but a ceiling to look at. Years later, a reporter who'd pieced part of it together asked Sol Brenner why a famous man would pay $3 million for a building and then let himself be thrown out of it without a word. Sol thought about it a long time. Because he wasn't there to be the owner, Sol finally said. He was there to be the kid in the prop loft one more time. And you can't be that kid and the man who owns the building at the same time. He knew which one he'd rather be. He's always known. I've told a lot of these stories on this channel. This is the one I keep coming back to lately, and it's not because of Cole, and it's not because of the check. It's because of Claire. It would be easy to make her the villain. The director who threw the savior of her own theater out the back door because he wasn't dressed well enough. That's the clean version. The one that lets us feel superior. But I don't think it's the true one. The true one is that Claire Whitlock was an 11-year-old girl, crouched in a balcony, loving something she'd been told she had no right to love, and getting walked out into the cold for it. And she spent 40 years making sure she'd never be that girl again, and somewhere in all that effort, she became the usher who walked her out. The people who guard the velvet rope most fiercely are almost never the ones who were born inside it. They're the ones who remember the alley. I don't know what I'd have done in that lobby. I'd like to think I'd have been Danny, that I'd have felt the wrongness of it and at least carried the question. But honestly, most of us follow the nod. Most of us walk the man out the back. Because the director gave the look, and we need the shift. And maybe that's the thing I keep turning over. The man in the corduroy jacket didn't measure that theater by its gold ceiling or its donors, or even the $3 million he'd spent on it. He measured it by one question, asked quietly at a side door, "Is there room in here for someone who just loves it?" And the whole worth of the place came down to whether anyone could answer. This story is fictional, inspired by the kind of person we'd all like to believe is standing quietly under the ceiling sometimes. The one who'd rather be the kid in the prop loft than the man who owns the building. If something in it landed for you, drop a comment and tell me what you took from it. I read them, and the quiet ones say the most. If you know someone who spent their whole life guarding a door because they can't forget the day they were walked out of one, share it with them. It might be the thing they needed to hear tonight. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe. There's another one coming, and I think you'll want to be here for it. See you in the next one.